currently recording several videos, which you'll see very soon right on my channel. Hi guys, it's great to see you again. It's been a while since I did a vlog style video like this, but I have so many things to say, especially about the Airbus Innovation Days, so I thought it's impossible for me not to just sit down and talk to you guys and tell you about it. But first I just want to show you, do you like my t-shirt? Can you see what it says? So in this video, I'm gonna go through the Airbus Innovation Days 2016 with you. And in case you don't know what the Airbus Innovation Days are, they are 2 days held sometime right in the beginning of summer at Airbus headquarters, either in Toulouse, Hamburg, or Cardiff. And this year we were in Hamburg, and I was so blessed and grateful to actually be invited to this event so that I could take part in seeing Airbus's latest innovations, seeing what's going on over there with deliveries, with how they think about evolving their cabins for their customers and everything like that. So this is a huge roundup where they invite press from all over the world to tell us the latest news from Airbus. This video will contain several little clips from the different speeches that different people at Airbus held. For example, the CEO of Airbus held a great speech where he answered some questions about everything from diversity in Airbus factories to some more maybe lighthearted questions about, for example, the A350. Just corrected the white balance, by the way, if you see that. So I have my laptop down here. I'm gonna go through some of the footage I got and some of that stuff. And we'll have a look. So funny, I open it up and this is what I was watching last. Typical me when I'm procrastinating, making videos and doing good stuff. Do you guys know how to get verified on YouTube? I really want to get verified on YouTube. So this first footage you'll see is so interesting. It's about how Airbus is using 3D printing to create aircraft parts. And in the future, just to sum it up, basically we could be 3D printing planes, we could be 3D printing parts that are missing and avoid huge delays. And they've already actually printed a prototype plane. So that's incredible, and you'll see all that in this clip that's coming right now.
20 aircraft, and now we are preparing for rate 60 in just 3 years from now. This is only feasible if you constantly innovate, reinvent yourself, and Tom Williams will show us how we do this. Tom, over to you.
You say they had to adjust the platform there to account for our different height. I hope you had a good evening last night with Klaus, and I hope Klaus paid for dinner, yeah? Because Klaus is a Schwabian, and the Schwabians are only slightly more tight-fisted than the Scots. So I hope that Klaus paid for the dinner and not Stefan. I'd like to take you through quickly where we are in terms of our ramp-up process and give you some sense of what is it we're focusing on for the coming years. You can see the size of the company today, 55,000 employees, and a very strong turnover, over 45 billion, which I think you know well. And over the last years, we've been successful in building a very strong backlog. That's primarily in single aisle and of course in A350. And we now have 400 operators worldwide for Airbus aircraft. In addition to that, I should mention that we've got over 7,700 suppliers around the world that make all of that possible. So it's a tremendous story, a global company, and certainly an exciting challenge for all of us. It still comes back to around the 6% year-on-year growth based on a world GDP around 2.4%. So from that point of view, it gives us confidence that growth will continue. And you know, from our market forecast, we still talk about 30,000 aircraft for the next 20 years. And our numbers are very similar to those of Boeing. And that's consistent with replacement patterns and what's happening in the rest of the world. Around every 5 hours. Now that's not quite automotive, but when we keep in mind that when the single aisle was developed, the expectation was that they would sell in the whole life of the program 700 aircraft. And here we are just passing 7,000. So we've had to evolve a lot during that time. We've evolved in terms of the design. You know, the electronics and the systems that are on today's 320 are quite different to what they were in the 80s. And the manufacturing processes have moved on as well. And I'll touch a little bit more on that later in my presentation. And of course, clearly for A350, that's our other big challenge. And we need to go to around 50 aircraft deliveries this year, and that's a huge step up in where we were last year. And it more or less means that, again, if you come back and talk to the guys here building 350 sections, that they need to be around rate 10 by the end of this year on section build.
Production. I also like to be one of the gold nuggets today, and I think you're right. I'm working with Airbus for more than 35 years now, 29 years in manufacturing, and 5 years now in the frame of R&T. So I'm looking for new technologies and concepts and try to bring it on the stage when the company is buying that. One of the first outcomes was the first flying structure part, which is done by out of titanium powder, printed, and all the tests passed so that we are able to fly with this since 2014. The interesting point is that we have weight reductions around 30%. The next outcome was also from 2012, a first printed spare part. It's a belt mold, it's outside. And the interesting point is, if you think about spare parts, you know, normally you have a lot of inventory. You have long lead times, you have to maintain tools which are 30 years old, and with the 3D printing we are really it's possible to do these kind of parts on demand and at the location where you need it. Complete aircraft. So this is a test platform. It's 4 per 4 meter, the weight is only 25 kilograms, it's outside, it's flown end of November, and it's not for having models flying or something like this. You know, in the past you needed several engineers working in theory on things for months, cost a lot of money. Now you print this kind of aircraft in 4 weeks, you crash it or not, and in a few weeks you know basic physics or whatever is needed.
Then another super cool thing, which I actually wasn't too aware about before this, was that Airbus, together with a foreign manufacturer, have developed a way to print the livery on planes. It looks like a home printer that you'd use to print, you know, a document from Word. It just goes back and forth with all the colors on the tail, on the fuselage eventually, and soon we could be printing such complex liveries on planes, and you'll see it, some of the examples in the pictures here.
To overcome all the obstacles we had in the old methods, because with growing expectations of our customers regarding what we can achieve in terms of complexity, and also increased expectations concerning the quality, we had to do something. And you can see on the right, for instance, a young man preparing the stencil for American Airlines. These are thousands of small dots that he has to extract out of the stencil, and there's a huge amount of man hours going into that. So basically what we have developed together with the supplier is a direct printing technology. So we use the advantage of the freedom we have from the adhesive film, but we get rid of the adhesive film and print directly onto the VTP. The printer head is similar to an inkjet printer, but only in principle. There are a lot of differences there. We're using the same CMYK color system you have in the inkjet printer, with an optional white primer, which allows us then to actually use the white to cover any color we have underneath it, and then we print directly over it, so we can get rid of any problems with underlying colors, darker colors. The ink is solvent-based, but it's ink instead of paint that we are using. And the 3D surface printing technology we are referring to here is not the same as Peter has referred to. We're not printing 3D structures, but we can follow a 3D contour, such as the VTP. So it's a very big printer. The one we have installed right now is 7 by 7 meters, and it has a 450 millimeter Z-axis to allow it to follow the contour of the VTP. And we print exactly the same as your inkjet printer at home, line by line, until the whole image is there. And thankfully we had a very persistent launch customer, Thomas Cook Airlines. Up to now we had delivered the aircraft with adhesive films on them. They weren't really happy with that decision, but we didn't really want to go into the adventure of so many aircraft in paint with graduation on it because of the reproducibility issues. So we agreed to print an aircraft for commercial use with our printing technology. And this aircraft was delivered in March 2016. And I haven't heard anything about it since, so I'm assuming that it's in good condition. So, as said, first industrial application or commercial application versus the adhesive film, it's a 3 kilogram weight saving. And the ink consumption for this is only 500 milliliters. If we would print the whole VTP, would need about 1.2 to 1.5 liters of ink, which is nothing compared to the amount that we've used in paint. So actually, ecologically, this is also a big step forward because this drastically reduces our VOC emissions compared to conventional paint. And this is one of the first steps for us towards our vision of a future factory, where we actually looking at printing a whole aircraft. And obviously this is a goal we're pursuing. It's a long way away, maybe not quite as long as we think. And that is basically our goal at some stage in the future, printing complete aircraft instead of painting them. So thank you very much for your attention. And we have, by the way, a non-flyable VTP with the Thomas Cook logo outside. You can't miss it. And we have on the marketplace a stand a bit hidden in the corner, rear left. Sorry. So you're welcome to visit us in the break. Thank you.
Here also we have some really interesting information about the A350 and A330neo. Of course, if you haven't heard about that either, Airspace by Airbus, which is their new cabin concept.
In our final assembly line, we have around 40 aircraft in our final assembly line process at different stages of the process. So it's a lot of work going on, and the ramp up is really there and feeding the final assembly line. So the second objective of the A350 family is the Dash 1000. The Dash 1000 is now taking shape, and we are on track for the entry into service in second half of 2017. And I will give you some details along these two key objectives for Airbus. We tend to put the A320 and A350 at the top of our corporate objectives this year, and for good reason. Meanwhile, we don't forget about the future, and we continue to develop the A350 family. Last year was the time of the A350-900 ultra long range. This was a project which was launched with Singapore Airlines in order to enable them to resume very long-haul mission like Singapore to New York that they were used to doing with the A340-500 in the past. But this A350-900 is an ideal platform to fulfill this mission. With a much higher efficiency than the A340-500 was doing. First, because of the platform itself, and second, because there will be more passengers in this platform, while enabling this very, very long journey, 19 hours journey. So this was an example of what incremental development. There is only a couple of simple adjustments to the airframe in order to get there, and you can see here the area where we have made some changes or some adjustments, and also we could bring through this development, we could bring the max takeoff weight of the 350 to 280 tons instead of 275 tons today. So all in one, simple, quick, easy, but creating a lot of value. That's what incremental development is about, and far less risky, of course, than developing a new platform. Now on the main platform, the 350-900, the current version. Where are we today? If you remember, a year ago, at the same time, we had delivered 3 aircraft, and we had delivered 3 aircraft to 1 operator. Where are we now? We have 6 airlines which have received their first A350, and you can read here the number. Qatar Airways has 8, Vietnam Airlines has 4, Finnair has 5, LATAM has 3, and Singapore has 3, and Cathay, since last Saturday, has got 1. So, and actually they are all in service, with the exception of Cathay, who will be in service in the very coming days, and perhaps even tomorrow, showing that ready to operate also applied even for a new aircraft, for a new operator. We deliver on the Saturday, and they expect to have commercial flights only 2 or 3 days later. So that's what it is about when we talk of introducing a new aircraft. So we can see that we could go through the hurdles of completely different heads of version, turn them around in a very quick way, and this showing that all the work that was done on the aircraft in the past years that I've been talking a lot about in making them ready for customization has paid off. Now, when they take the aircraft, our operators operate them, and you can see all the routes that are being covered by the A350 today, around 30 routes, and already 2 million passengers having used the A350 since the entry into service. And you can see here some of the number. So 12 hours, more than 12 hours, 13 hours, I would even say, average daily utilization of the aircraft. And for some operators, it's even more than that. So the aircraft is really flying everywhere. And you can see that geographically, in terms of support for Didier's team, and I'm sure we will say a few words on this, it was also a challenge to make sure that we had support in all places, and that was one thing that we had to take into account, deploying, preparing carefully with each and every operator the entry into service of the A350. So now, what does it do in terms of operations and customer satisfaction? First, the 2 million passengers that have been flown already. This has been done through more than 50,000 flight hours, and this is, of course, continue to grow. I think now we have around 1,200 flight cycles per month, so and this keeps growing every time we deliver a new aircraft. In early 2016, and actually this early 2016 was the 10th of February when we had the first section of the A350-1000 entering the final assembly line. So exactly on time, the team did a great work, having learned all the lessons of the A350-900 development. We could enter the final assembly line with a very high level of maturity, and actually very close to the 900 one. So that was well done. Neo, first of all, the A330 in 2015, and has continued this very successful journey, and since then we have secured our transition from the A330ceo into the A330neo, ensuring the rate 6 in 2016, which is still a very high level of production, while we transition progressively from 2018 into the A330neo ramp up. So very successful family. Success is confirmed, and we now look forward to seeing the A330neo in the final stage. So A330neo development is progressing very well. You can see pictures here of different components. The air-inlet, which is made in Nantes, the engine is coming from Rolls-Royce. We have the center wing box coming from Nantes, and the nacelle from Aircel, and the pylon in Saint-Éloi. All this is progressing very well, and will be now entering the final assembly line in the last quarter of the year. So the A330neo, in terms of development, you remember it was a very short development. We needed to have it short precisely to have a smooth transition between the A330ceo and the A330neo, and this is what we are achieving. And now going forward, the next step, the final assembly line, and preparing for the first flight in the first half of 2017. So I think we are on track. We are going to deliver an incremental development, one more incremental development of the A330 family, which has been a very, very long journey since its beginning, and progressively delivering more and more performance to our customer. So actually reviewing the customer needs and looking at what could further boost the A330neo on the marketplace, we decided that definitely we needed to take one more step in terms of cabin development, and this is why we have now developed, and we are developing for the A330neo a new interior, which will put it in the same look and feel as the A350 cabin, and this will be achieved by the means of different beams and new entrance area. We will also use some of the enablers of the other program, A320 and also A350, by introducing different labs and galleys in the back of the aircraft.
And for A320neo, which is exciting, if you haven't seen my A320neo videos, make sure to click these annotations, which will pop up now. Hopefully, if I forgot about that, they're in the description. And there you can see the sound test, for example, that I did on the A320neo.
Clearly, our objective was a gain in fuel efficiency by 15%. But on the other hand, for sure, this aircraft is going to fly in large families together with the CEO, and this is why we were striving for high commonality of 95%. And I can tell you now that we are done with it. We have achieved it. So 95% of the airframe between CEO and NEO exactly the same, which is very simple then for our customers in terms of customer support, spares provisioning and maintenance. Some other features, you see increased cabin efficiency with more seats, going up to 240 seats on the A321, but also up to 189 seats on the A320. Also other improvements regarding maintenance. Time between overhaul on the landing gear has been extended by 20%. The MPD has been reduced by 5%, and in fact we have taken some extra weight on the aircraft in order to ease the maintenance life, but we still have outperformed our weight target. And the new bleed system was also something we had pneumatically controlled, which we have changed to an electronically controlled as the last aircraft in Airbus, and this is also paying back very well. what did we get finally out? In the beginning, you are always ambitious and you are looking for many things, and in the end, you count what you have achieved. The good news is we have achieved each and every objective that we were after, and most of them have been overachieved, which is very important. There is no need for us to recover anything. Fuel burn 15%, this is the most pessimistic value per trip. It even reaches out way above that, and when you divide even by the increased seat count, we have an SFC per seat or fuel burn per seat improvement of more than 20%, especially on the A321. Rate extension goes along with the less fuel burn. 500 nautical miles have been confirmed, and with the A321 long range, it's even 1,000 nautical miles where we can fly a 4,000 nautical mile mission comfortably over the Atlantic Ocean. Better low-speed performance was not necessarily our design objective in the beginning, because we wanted to maintain the low. This was an A320.
So now we're already on the second day. Skip to there. You don't have to stay the night and have dinner and all that. You just get to experience the second day straight away. And this was actually, I think, my favorite speech during the whole Innovation Days with John Leahy from Airbus. I'm sure you've seen him in the Airbus delivery videos and such. He had a really cool speech, which you'll get to see now.
Key airports trying to take off. 95% load factors are higher on some of these airplanes. Growth rate, 3.3%, and that rate seems pretty flat for at least the last couple of years. It was actually even lower a few years before that. You do Western Europe, and it is higher, close to 5%. It's been increasing lately. It's driven in large part by the low-cost carriers, the EasyJets, that other guy in Ireland that uses some airplane, I forget, and Wizz and others. But it is allowing people to fly. It's allowing people to fly that 10 years ago were not flying. And here's where you really see the difference. Although it seems to be going down as a rate of growth in the last few years, it's still enormous. Think about 8%, 8.2% year over year rate of growth. That's what's driving this industry. Market demand, we've got 6,400 new orders in the last 5 years. And that's why we're ramping up production. People say, well, gee, you know, are you sure you need to have this ramp up in production? Well, what are we supposed to do? We've got legally binding contracts with deposits paid for these orders. Of course we have to ramp up production. This isn't like the automobile industry. You know, Tom Williams, Fabrice and I don't sit around, Didier Everard, and try to figure out how many airplanes we should produce next year and then run around and see if we can sell them, which is what the car manufacturers do. And if they can't sell them, they have rebates and sales, etc. We will not put an aircraft in production unless we have legally binding contracts for that airplane. So when people start saying, should they ramp up production, should they not? I don't know why there's a debate about that. If you've got the contract for the airplane, someone wants to buy it, you should ramp up production. If you go back over the last 5 years, you can see that orders were pretty strong. I couldn't help but point out that we were beating the other guy for quite a few of the last 5 years there, but it is lower right now. You can see in 2015 it was slowing down a bit in terms of orders. That's normal and natural. If it didn't start slowing down, I'd start wondering about the real value of some of those orders. You know, how can you have orders of 1,000 airplanes a year and be producing 650 or so? So we have to get back into balance with a book-to-bill of around 1. We think we're going to be there this year. I think Boeing will be as well. It is slowing down. Imagine that as being, well, you're about a third of the way through the year, so multiply that by 3, and it'll still be a step down from 15. But as long as it's a book-to-bill of 1 or better, we're quite content going forward because of this chart. This chart assumes that from today on to 2020, we only book orders equal to what we're delivering, book-to-bill of 1. And in the past, as you saw, we've been going like double that. So just assuming that conservative book-to-bill of 1, you can see that the backlog is still very strong. So if you say, well, are you sure some of those low-cost carriers might not want to, delay some orders? I certainly hope so. Isn't somebody going to go bankrupt? Probably. And that's why, at least in the single aisle, we've got that big pad going forward, and that is another reason why we're quite comfortable with the ramp up to 60 airplanes, or for those sitting at my table last night, I'm lobbying for even more than 60 going forward, because I'm looking at those real orders sitting on top of the ramp up. So it's a good position to be in going forward, and it's being driven by the growth in air travel. Now this goes all the way back to the dawn of the jet age, basically when the 747 was introduced in 1970, and I was driving a yellow cab in New York City. It was a fun time. But the industry, look at the size. These are RPKs. The industry was about 500 billion RPKs a year. Look where it is right now. It's up there at about 6.5 trillion. That's about 12 times. That's impressive when you think about it. It's 12 times bigger than it was when the 747 was introduced. All those people who never even dreamt of flying are now flying, and they need airplanes to fly in. And that air traffic growth, you can see recessions, I put them in there, the oil crisis, Gulf crisis, Asian crisis, 9/11. And let's go back to 9/11. People thought the industry would never be the same. And remember all the pundits, and some of you are writing articles about this industry has changed forever. A few of us, wild optimists, were saying no, it hasn't, it'll come back. And I dare say we were right, because look what happened. It did flatten out. In one of the biggest blows any industry could have, 9/11 in the United States, all airplanes stopped, airplanes not getting into the United States, people terrified about getting into airplanes, and look what happened. A pause for a couple of years, and then growth continues, so that now we are double the size of the industry on 9/11. Double the size in terms of people flying around the world. Every 15 years, the industry doubles in size. Out in Asia, it's about every 10 years the industry has been doubling in size. Not our industry per se, it's the air traffic industry, the airline industry, the number of people flying the revenue passenger kilometers. And one of the reasons for that is people have money. The rise of the middle class, which was a phenomenon that you really only had in Western Europe, United States, and say Japan and Australia. All the rest of the countries around the world 30 years ago were either, if you were in the country, you were either very rich or you were very poor. There wasn't a big middle class. Well, if you go back just about 10 years and look at Europe, you can see a very interesting phenomenon. The middle class stays about the same. It doesn't increase, it doesn't decrease. Populations are basically the same in Western Europe. Put North America in there and you see a very similar story. Stays pretty flat, doesn't really increase, doesn't decrease. Donald Trump, by the way, is going to fix that. I don't want to get into that. I'm sort of the token American who says, how could you be electing Donald Trump? Anyway, I got to be careful if he becomes the president. I won't be allowed back in. Other emerging markets, look at that. Other emerging markets around the world are doubling. And then you get Asia Pacific. Go back 10 years, 600 going to about 2,600. Look at the growth rate of the middle class. And what does it mean if you're middle class? Well, it means you've got disposable income. You can meet all of your needs, housing and the rest, and you have money left over to spend. So it's not just disposable income that you're using to fly. In places like India, people who got off the trains or are getting on airplanes for visiting friends and family, VFR, etc. But it also means as the economy picks up, you're traveling for business. Small businesses are discovering that it's economical to move people around on some of these low-cost carriers. And that's driving tremendous growth around the world. So much so that you get real changes from what people would believe. Now, This is today, and by the way, we'll have our new global market forecast out at the Farnborough Air Show this year. Kieran and I were just talking about the fact that our database always seems to be about 2 years out of phase here, but it hasn't changed very much. You look at Asia Pacific, about 29%, Europe, about 25% of all the traffic, and 25% over there. These are RPKs by the airlines based in those countries. And then it goes down to Africa being the lowest. Well, that's pretty much what you would expect. 20 years ago, when I started doing these presentations around the world, it was basically the United States, North America is the biggest one. The second one was Europe, and then the small one was Asia Pacific. And we were predicting Asia Pacific would grow such that they would end up being the biggest one. And sure enough, they're slightly bigger. But what happens in the next 20 years? The growth of that middle class, the growth of that for visiting friends and relatives, leisure, plus business travel, will make Asia Pacific the real center of aviation travel around the world. And then Europe will get bigger, and everybody gets bigger, North America gets bigger, but they become a much smaller percentage of all the aviation travel around the world. So if you want to see what this industry is going to look like in 20 years, you need to see what Asia will look like in 20 years, because we're tracking that very carefully. Asia Pacific right now, we threw a few things, quotes in there, or sound bites, or whatever you might use in some of your articles that we're proud of anyway. The first A320neo was delivered to India. Some people don't know that. Indigo is flying several aircraft right now, taking more. And these are with the old engines, Pratt engines. They're running over 99% dispatch reliability. ANA said they're going to start flying A380s. The A350 XWB, about a third of the total order book for that airplane, is out in Asia Pacific. And then on the Neo, Garuda is the third Asian airline to order the aircraft. A third of the Airbus in-service fleet today is in Asia Pacific, and it'll be substantially higher in 20 years, with 2,000 aircraft in our backlog belonging to Asia Pacific. Then Europe, about 31%. You'd expect that. We're a European manufacturer. 50 daily A380 flights at Heathrow. Think about that. 50 daily A380 flights at Heathrow. It's a congested airport. The only way we're going to double traffic every 15 years at Heathrow is to use bigger aircraft. Our A320neo is moving into the market. Airlines are very happy with that. And then you have the Americas, a smaller percentage for us. It would be slightly bigger for Boeing, but I think Boeing is heavier and stronger in that mature market than we are. We're catching up. But if I had a choice of being the dominant player in the fast-growing Asian Pacific market or the slower-growing domestic markets of the US and Western Europe, I'd take Asia Pacific, which is exactly where we are going forward. And then some of you say, or some of the wags of the industry, I wonder, Airbus is really getting dependent upon some of these big Middle East carriers. Not in the overall picture of things, we're not. 10% of our in-service fleet there, 450 aircraft, a lot of them are wide bodies, and our backlog are from the Middle East, but that isn't a very big percentage at all. So we're quite comfortable with that. Then we have the family, the A320 family. We'll get into some of this in more detail in Kieran's presentation, but I draw your attention to that number. Every 2 seconds, an A320 is taking off or landing somewhere in the world. Every 2 seconds. 1, 2, 1, 2. An A320 took off or landed somewhere in the world. And as we go into the future, it'll get down to every 1 second. This is the workhorse of the industry. We delivered our 7,000th aircraft, MSN number 7,000, to our friends at Volaris just a little while ago, beginning of May. And of course, the A321 is taking the world by storm. 2,800 sales to over 100 customers. This year, it'll be 40% of our single-aisle deliveries. Next year, the year after, it should be moving up to about 50% of our single-aisle deliveries. That is absolutely amazing going forward. And the A320neo is also taking the world by storm. We said 15% better fuel consumption, and we're getting somewhere between 16 and 17%. We said 10 dB below stage 4. We're getting 11, 12 dB below stage 4. And of course, when you burn less fuel, it's less NOx, it's less pollution, it's less carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. It's much better for the environment. So we're pleased. We think this was probably one of the better things we ever came up with in December of 2010. But if you remember December of 2010, when we launched this program, a lot of you were saying the jury is still out. Will it work or will it not work? Our competitor was saying, let's do an all-new clean sheet of paper airplane for $15 billion. We said the technology was not there, and most of the technology would come from the engine, so let's just put a new generation of engines on our existing airplanes, clean up the aerodynamics of our existing airplanes, and we have a win-win for everybody, because we don't spend $15 billion, so we don't have to charge the airlines amortization of that $15 billion in the price of the airplane. It worked beautifully going forward, and Boeing followed us with the MAX. And dare I say that we've got about 60% of that market. And the reason for that, I don't like to take credit for my fantastic sales team. I think they're about as good as the Boeing sales team. But, okay, better than the Boeing sales team. I got an insurrection starting down here. No, they're better than the Boeing sales team. But in December of 2010, I would have told you an A320ceo was better than a 737NG by a little bit. And then Boeing would have come in and given you a presentation that they're better. Well, they say by a lot, but they just lie. The fact is, it's a little bit. That's why I did my Pinocchio hair. Anyway, most airlines would say they were so close together, except for Airbus's bigger seat and the containerized cargo, they were virtually identical in the market. So we had about a 50-50 split. But we were able to do more with our Neo than they could do with their MAX. They're sitting low to the ground. They can't really get a bigger fan size in like we could. We were able to get the geared turbofan on our airplane. They stayed with CFM. We offered 2. And then we were able to do a little bit more aerodynamic cleanup. They did some aerodynamic cleanup too, but again, it drives down a lot to the engine. So we ended up with, from being just about equal to being better in the marketplace. The airlines are voting with their order books. They're seeing about a 60-40 split in terms of what they want to order for that single-aisle market. And we're comfortable with that. And after a lot of yelling and screaming, I think my friends in Seattle will probably get comfortable with that as well. Anyway, the A320neo, as we said before, is the undisputed market leader. It has 79%, let's say 80% market share since we launched the program, and they launched their program about 6-7 months after we launched ours. That really is amazing when you think about it. This is probably the most efficient airplane in the world, because big singles are always going to be more efficient than light twins. By definition, there's less frontal area moving through the air, less drag, etc. So if you get the same number of people in a long, thin airplane, it's going to be more efficient than in a wider airplane by the laws of aerodynamics and physics. We have the better long, thin airplane, and that's got about 80% of the market going forward. And it opens up new routes, like crossing oceans that the 757 does today. But I was talking to an airline CEO, a European airline CEO, last week, who was talking about how he wants to replace his 757s with A321neos and open up even more routes across the Atlantic. It makes sense. You can do secondary city to secondary city. There's a market potential, we think, of about 1,000 aircraft just in that long-range sector. Now, some of you have been talking about the middle of the market. And you've been talking about the middle of the market because they've been talking about the middle of the market out in Seattle. I guess they like to talk a bit. But as we look at the lineup here, you see orders in the last 5 years. The light twin, or the smallest twin you can have up there, is a 330 up against their 787-8. We've got, in terms of orders, 2/3 of all the orders in the light twin category. And if you take our 321 in the last 5 years up against their 737 MAX, We've got 75% of the order book. 79 was going all the way back to the beginning of the program, 75 in the last 5 years. So at least from our point of view, we don't see this middle of the market product gap. But if you were looking at that from Seattle, you would see a middle of the market product gap, and you'd be saying, what are we going to do about it? It's not easy what you do to fill that, because if you do a clean sheet of paper airplane, it's $15 billion. Well, you know, you'd like to fix a 737-9 and maybe do a light twin. 15 billion is an awful lot of money to pay to put 2 airplanes in there. So I think what they'll probably do is come out with an updated engine on the 737-9, trying to make it more competitive with the A321. Perhaps Kieran can talk a little bit more about what we see in that marketplace. We're not worried because they still have the short landing gear. They still will be trying to get close to a Me-Too airplane and not quite reaching the performance of 321. They haven't named it yet, but we believe it'll be called the Mad Max. Anyway, then looking at the A330, we're very pleased with that. An A330 takes off or lands in that light twin category every 20 seconds, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week around the world. It is the workhorse of the twin engine market. 350 aircraft in backlog right now. A very impressive airplane. We sold quite a few, but then we said, well, Neo worked extremely well for single aisle. Let's do a Neo version of our best-selling wide-body twin, the world's best-selling wide-body twin. And look what we come up with. We get from the engine about 11% improvement, but we get an aerodynamic improvement of 4%, so we have about 10%, rather 15% improvement going forward. So that is an impressive number on a wide-body twin. A lot of people don't believe that that this airplane's been changed a lot, but it really has. The inside looks like a 350. We'll get into that in a minute. But the outside has 3.7, basically 4 meters more wingspan than today's 330CO. It has belly fairing cleanup. It has a lot of aerodynamic cleanup. We're at 242-ton takeoff weight. We're looking at bringing that up to 245-ton takeoff weight, or perhaps even beyond, which means more range and payload on the airplane. It'll be a very impressive airplane, and it stays within Category E. Now, Category E means you don't need to put folding wings and all sorts of other stuff on that to stay out of Category F gates. That's why the 777, by the way, would be a Category F airplane, but folds its wings up so it stays in Category E. We found a pretty efficient way to stay in Category E ourselves with this airplane going forward. 14 to 15% fuel efficiency improvement. For those of you who did the previous slide, 11 and 4 is 15% improvement. Okay. Full commonality with the A330, common type rating. Same type rating as the 350 XWB. 186 orders from 10 customers around the world. And we have the new airspace interior in that airplane. Look at that interior. That is a beautiful interior going forward. And here we have an A330 Neo and an A350 XWB. To a passenger, they're going to be very similar airplanes. So what we were really looking for is the 2 interior pictures side by side. But maybe Kieran can have that in his presentation. If you look at the 2 interior presentations, slides, side by side of a 330 Neo and an A350 XWB, I'll bet you can't tell which one is which. I guarantee a passenger won't either. That's impressive. You now have the same experience of a 350 and a much better experience, in our humble opinion, than a 787 in a 330 Neo going forward. But what about the economics? Well, we're going to have a few more seats, and they're going to be 18-inch seats. We have the same range as a 787-8, and we have about 2.5% or so better fuel burn. Now, Boeing would say they've got 2.5% better fuel burn. Even if the airlines say they're equal, all right, I'll take equal. So here we have equal range, equal cash operating cost, equal fuel burn, a brand new modern airplane that's about 25% lower in capital cost than the 787 going forward. That is a very attractive economic model. If you look at it with the A330-900, the 787-9, you see something very similar, about the same in fuel per seat, cash operating cost per seat. The one thing you do see in their advantage is about another 1,000 or so, 1,500 nautical miles more in range. Not every airline needs to fly for 15 hours in these airplanes. If you don't, you're much better off in a 330neo. But that's one of the reasons why we're looking at more takeoff weight on the airplane, which means more fuel you can load on board, and you can actually fly it further to try to narrow that gap on an airplane that's still about 25% lower capital cost than the 787 going forward. Then we have the 350XWB, 800 orders, 24 deliveries, 780 aircraft in the backlog. Beautiful interior, again, airspace interior, looks like the other airspace interior. Comfort, ambiance, we've really got it. We'll be talking more about that going forward. And these are 24 aircraft delivered. Our friend Pekka from Finnair is very, very happy with his airplane. Our overall experience, the new aircraft types are unreservedly positive. Well, thank you very much. That's an airline CEO. As you know, airline CEOs can be quite critical of the operation of the airplane, quite critical of manufacturers. It's nice to know that someone is very happy with the products going forward. A350-1000, entry into service, December of 2017. Development's on track, 181 orders for that airplane going forward. And we see that as a 1,000 aircraft replacement market. Compared to the 777-300ER, if we want to do a mission, let's say we would leave London and fly to Singapore, we would have the same number of passengers as Boeing would, although we'd have the 18-inch seats, and with their 10 abreast, they'd have 17-inch seats. But we'd have about the same number of passengers. We'd have the same range. Actually, we would be about 400 miles greater, but let's say the same range, same cargo capacity, but their airplane would take off 40 tons heavier. 20 tons of structure, because it's an old airplane and it's heavier than our clean sheet of paper airplane, and 20 tons more fuel that they would have to burn flying from London to Singapore to do the exact same mission. And we would fly there, flying at Mach 8.5, and they'd be flying around 8.3 or so. We'd have that 6,000 foot cabin. They'd have 7,800 to 7,900 foot cabin. So all in all, Boeing said, you know, we've got a problem. We have a real competitive shortfall with a 777-300ER. And 2 years ago, at the Dubai Air Show, they claimed the entire market moved to 40 to 50 seats bigger with the 777X, which was a Category F airplane, but fold the wings to make it a Category E airplane. Now, the 777-300ER was a very good selling airplane. You know, dare I say, it pushed the 340 out of the marketplace. It was a pretty good airplane. And overnight, we were stunned. Overnight, they said it's obsolete. The new future is 40 to 50 seats bigger and folding wings going forward. Well, look at how many airplanes they sold in the last 2 years. It's not many, because after that splash with Tim Clark, and then Akbar got involved with buying some airplanes, Etihad bought some airplanes, and things slowed down dramatically. We don't believe that 2 years ago in November the market just dramatically changed away from that size category. We believe that size category is still there. Airlines like it. It's a very good size category. It's a good range setting. They just like a better, more efficient airplane, and that's going to be called a 350-1000 in December of next year when it enters service. 23% lower cost per seat. That's a lot. Cash operating costs per seat, it's even lower, about 26% lower fuel consumption. That's an impressive dynamic going forward. But let's say, okay, Airbus can look at that market going forward, and we talked about that last night and a few of the tables. Should we stretch the 350-1000? Should we not? And we're debating that internally, talking to some of the industry, but I'm not convinced that the entire market just moved over there. So let's say the market for the 777-300ER stays where it is, 1,000 airplanes at least. We've got a 350-1000 sitting there, replacing all those 777-300ERs, but we don't do a stretch, so it has to compete with the stretch. How is it going to compete with the 777X? We think pretty well. It's 35 tons lower empty weight. 35 tons lower empty weight. Now, they've got about, in this configuration, 32 more seats. Boeing would say, no, they got 40 more seats. And so, okay, we can argue back and forth, depends on the airline layout. Let's say 32 to 40 more seats. But we've got 7% lower cost per seat in terms of the cash operating cost. We've got 400 miles more range. We've got the 18-inch seat compared to their 17.2-inch seat now, because they're trying to carve out the interior a little bit. So we think this airplane not only does a fantastic job of replacing 777-300ERs, but when you do need to have a competition running it nose to nose with a 777X, it's a pretty good alternative. Those 32 to 40 incremental seats have got to be worth an awful lot to you to carry all this inefficiency for those 32 to 40 seats. And remember, our catalog price for this airplane and net price is going to be lower than a 777X, significantly lower. So we are on the fence about whether we really need to produce an airplane to go after the 777X nose to nose in that same size category. And we're going back and forth talking to airlines about that. What we are doing is improving the 350, and this is the 350-900 ULR, which will be replacing 340-500s, which were doing the longest non-stop flights for Singapore Airlines just a few years ago. It's going Singapore to New York, Singapore to Los Angeles. So this is what Chunpeng Go is saying. He really likes that airplane. Compared to the 777-8, which is the smaller version of the 777X, we've got 40 tons less empty weight in this one, and a 10% cost per seat saving for an airplane that can do the same mission. He looked at both. Remember, when he decided to do this, the 777-8 was available, and he said, no, I want to go with the efficient airplane, getting us to New York City from Singapore. And we're not stopping here. It's continuous improvement going forward. Kieran will talk a little bit more about this, but between now and 2020, we'll be improving fuel burn by another 2%. We'll be improving range by another 500 nautical miles, and we'll be getting another 5 tons in payload, that's cargo or passengers, whatever you want, in the A350. Worth $4 million in net present value over the life of the airplane. And the way this normally gets calculated, if it's worth $4 million, we believe that the airline gets half of that, and we get the other half of that. So we charge another couple $1 million for those packages going forward. And then last but not least, we have the A380, a fantastic airplane. A lot of you wouldn't believe it, but every 3 minutes, an A380 takes off or lands somewhere in the world on a revenue passenger flight. I've got a big plasma screen in my office in real time watching every 380 fly around the world. It's mesmerizing. Sometimes I can sit there and stare at it for an hour and get absolutely nothing done. But watch the airplanes in real time. You touch them. It tells you all about this is a Singapore flight. This is his speed. This is his altitude. Here's where he's going. Here's where he departed. It's very, very fascinating going forward. Anyway, we know the future has to be in this size category. We're doubling every 15 years around the world. We're doubling traffic every 10 years in Asia Pacific. Are we doubling the number of airports? Well, maybe in China, I'll give you that. They are, but no place else in the world. Look at Heathrow, look at Charles de Gaulle, look at Frankfurt, JFK, LAX. We're not doubling airport capacity. In fact, it's virtually impossible to do much more than tweak the airport capacity and the edges. We have to have bigger aircraft going forward. There'll be 75 megacities in 10 years, not 20 years, in 10 years from now. 75 megacities. Everyone says, well, we'll be flying point to point. I agree. Connecting those is point-to-point flying, and it has to be done with A380s. Nobody wants to go to the airport to have your 3:10 a.m. departure or arrive at some airport at 4:10 in the morning. Even the leisure passengers don't want to do that. So flying bunches up around day flights and night flights, and it'll continue doing that in the future. Here are 3 mega airports: Los Angeles, London Heathrow, and Hong Kong. Today, at Hong Kong, there are 14 daily A380 flights, and that's where they're going. 14 a day going out of Hong Kong. If we go to Los Angeles, 24 flights a day. People say, well, when are the Americans going to get a chance to fly on the 380? An awful lot of Americans are flying on A380s today. Unfortunately, not with the US carriers, but they are flying on A380s. 24 flights a day goes into Los Angeles. And this one absolutely amazes me. Into Heathrow, there are 50 A380 flights a day. 50. 8% of all passengers in 2015 flew on an A380. This year, it'll be 10%. This comes from the British Airport Authority. They gave us these numbers. You go through Heathrow and you see these massive hordes of people everywhere, pushing and shoving, and long queues for immigration and security. Just think about that next time you're there. 10% of everyone you see out there is getting on or getting off an A380. 10% of all the people going through going to Heathrow today are doing it with an A380.
Well, Heathrow is one of the great airports of the world, but we're also full. And when you're at capacity, you need to have the largest planes operating from your airport to be able to serve more passengers. And that is what the A380 does. It's one of the largest, it is the largest plane in the world. It helps us to serve more passengers on the very busy routes out of Heathrow. And it also frees up slots to allow us to serve some new routes in North America, South America, and Asia that we wouldn't otherwise be able to serve.
We know that every single year when you have a daily non-stop overseas flight coming into Los Angeles, it generates hundreds of millions of dollars in economic growth and economic activities. With A380, the capacity increases, so we have even more people coming, so I'm sure that number is even higher than before.
The image of a community is in part determined by its airport and the airlines that serve that airport. And we're very proud of the fact that so many of our airlines use A380s because it provides exactly the kind of quality service that I know their passengers want and that our customers here and residents here want to fly on when they take a long flight overseas.
A whole host of aircraft choices will encourage a lot of passengers to choose our airport. And of course the fact that the availability of A380s and other wide-body aircrafts is actually a very positive way of encouraging more passengers to choose the Hong Kong International Airport in the future.
For over the last 30 years, the number of people impacted by aircraft noise at Heathrow has pretty much halved. That's because of new technologies such as the A380. And it means that we can expand Heathrow still and have fewer people impacted by aircraft noise because of aircraft like the A380. That is why we incentivize airlines to bring their cleanest, quietest planes, such as the A380, here to Heathrow.
You know, when an A380 takes off from London Heathrow, it's behind a 747-400. It probably has about 100 to 150 more people on board. It has half the noise footprint on the community as that 747 in front of it. That's why they're so impressed. Airports around the world are banking on the A380 to allow them to fly more people through their hubs and do it more economically with less environmental impact, less noise footprint. Only the A380 can do that.
And last but certainly not least, from this news roundup of the Airbus Innovation Days, we have Fabrice Bregier, who is the president and CEO of Airbus, with his annual speech on the general happenings at Airbus. And I know you'll enjoy this.
I'm now very pleased to welcome with you Fabrice Bregier, our Airbus president and CEO. And Fabrice, after 2 very eventful, information-rich days, we really appreciate this 150 media from all over the world here in this room. We really appreciate that you take the time with us to give us the latest view from the top on the latest developments and any future avenues we could take. Fabrice, over to you.
Thank you, Stefan. Good afternoon, everybody. You went through 2 tough days, so I will be extremely short. You've got detailed presentations on everybody who counts at Airbus. I could see that they got into details. I'm impressed with the span of the questions and the scope which has been discussed with you. As the CEO of Airbus, I'm very pleased to manage this team. I think this is a very experienced but also a very focused team and very balanced. You could see some also differences of opinion sometimes, and this is why I believe I have a good team. I don't want people who still think the same way, who have the same understanding of the issues, and who at the same time try to know what I want first before telling me that I am right. I can tell you, in this team, it doesn't work like that. Anyway, at the end, I am right. Having said that, you have seen the focus for 2016. This is not a surprise. This is to deliver. We knew that we would be anyway facing a tough year regarding A350, because even if we delivered since the certification of the aircraft at the end of 2014, 15 aircraft, which was in line with our plan, we knew that 2016 would really be the year for the ramp-up, moving up to at least 50 aircraft. We have delivered only 9, so we have 41 to go. It seems difficult, but this is also largely due for the first half of problems we face. You have understood that on the cabin. It looks a bit silly to be blocked on a few seats or lavatories, but they are also high-tech, and this is our job to make it work. So the bet is that all that will catch up smoothly in the coming months, and then we'll rush till the end of the year to achieve it. What was probably less planned was also the difficult ramp-up on single aisle. We have both globally a ramp-up challenge, which on A320 is acceptable, that it is a mature aircraft. But on top of that, we launch this year 2 new versions with the A320neo. So the first one had a difficult start. This is clear that the performance is there. The performance is even higher than what we expected, but we came into a series of maturity issues, teething problems, whatever the name, which are about to be solved, and this is, I think, the positive message. So this is why we continue to produce gliders, as Tom Williams told you, and magically these gliders, second half of the year, will get their engines with all the issues, operational issues fixed. By the way, the improvements are already very visible at Lufthansa and Indigo. They are flying almost normally, these aircraft, with a very good dispatch reliability. So we are not starting from scratch, but we need to deliver the full performance. And this is the challenge also we are facing. So by far the highest priority everywhere. I think Didier Evrard told you yesterday that it was for him his toughest year. I have to remind him of the start in 2007 of the A350, together with the crisis of the A380 in a non-integrated Airbus, with an exchange rate of the dollar at 135 for €1. And a company who was burning cash. In other terms, he's losing his memory, and perhaps I should look for a succession plan. Having said that, you have seen also that we are trying to stabilize our backlog. The 650 plus orders this year are achievable. I checked on the way, and the best ever year, I think, was 2011. We got 1,400 something net orders, and at the end of the first quarter, we had 1 net order in the backlog. So I don't say we will go as high. We have a backlog of 6,700 aircraft. It means that reasonably we cannot expect customers to buy now aircraft we will deliver in 2030. So we need to ramp up our production. We need to give them some lead time which is reasonable, and this is not reasonable now if you want to buy an A350 or even an A320neo. But we believe that the market is still strong, whatever other people can say. Me as well, to my shareholders, I explained that this is extremely challenging, extremely difficult, but at the end of the day, what counts is the market. A good sign is that when people know we have some difficulties facing the A320neo deliveries and ramp up, they tell us, can we get more CEOs? So this is a strong indication that the market is positive. So I'm confident that we will at least have a book-to-bill above 1. And this is, I think, after 3 years when we got twice the order book, launching new products, also a sign of strength which validates our options regarding ramp-up of the production, and especially the single aisle. The second message I would like to insist upon is also the fact that our incremental development strategy is taking shape. You could see that when we launched, for instance, the A350 ULR. This one was listening to a customer, Singapore Airlines, looking at various options, making sure that the A350 could do the job. And we came up with this proposal, which is, I think, unique in the world. The A321 long range is another example. As a potential successor of the 757, it will exist. It will be the A321 long range. And we will come up with additional ideas beyond the big upgrades like the A330neo. On the developments, we are globally on track. This is also new for this industry. The A330neo is at final assembly line in the next quarter, and so we are in line for certification at the end of 2017, which would be, I think, the shortest ever development lead time for a big evolution of an aircraft. We have also the A350-1000, which is well on track, and we believe is already, even without having flown, at the level of performance we have guaranteed to our customers. We have ideas, as you could see, of course, as an example, stretching or not a bit further this A350-1000. We are looking at market feedback on this one. We are, I must say, convinced that we can do the job, but we are not convinced that we should launch it because we believe that the bulk of the market will be one-for-one replacement of the A350, of the 737-300ER, and the -1000 does the job. But we have this possibility. So we are continuing our part. And the last point is what Charles, is what Mark presented to you. We are more open to other types of innovation. Digitalization, everybody talks about it. You are covering other industries, other companies, they will all tell you that they do great things regarding digitalizations. I have to admit that we were lagging behind. And for the last 12 months, we have really pressed upon the proof of concepts in some industrial initiatives, but also engineering, customer support, production, and of course, development of our products. And we know now what we can obtain from that. And we believe that we are in some areas even among the top players if we talk about ALM on hard metal like titanium. There are not many companies doing that, of course. So we are nicely catching up, and it will be a big breakthrough in many areas. I'm very pleased, Charles, that you presented what we are doing with Oracle Team USA. They have won the last cup, and we been selected as their technology partner. This is very interesting to see that in this environment our engineers are getting agility, and that we are bringing value to a team which is considered as the best in its domain, which is similar to our domain, but also far away because they are a race team. So all that I think is very good also for the mindset of Airbus. Yes, focused on the key priorities, operational, but also open to external innovation. And this is in line globally with the strategy that Tom Enders wants for the group, which is being the best in the domain, but being aware, and especially the space sector has warned us, being aware that other technologies can make a difference. And this is clearly appropriate for us to have these technologies on board and to get the best out of it. As a conclusion, I would like to give you one last news, because you've got so many, so my speech is a bit empty. This last news is that we got today the type certificate of the A320neo, which is powered by the CFM LEAP 1A engine. So this is, of course, another very good news for the A320neo. This is, I think, coincidental that we have this. Perhaps we could have got it yesterday, but don't worry, we didn't hold it for a couple of months before this innovation days. But we have it now certified, so we have the first 2 members with 2 engines. These 2 engines are very good engines, and we need both to cope with our ramp-up challenges. So you will see, I think, the first CFM-powered engine in service probably this summer, July or August. So this is in line with the plan. This is what I wanted to tell you, and now I'm very pleased to take up a few questions.
And that was all. I hope this video doesn't drag out to be too long. I'm not really sure how long it's going to be yet. I know I have 4 or 5 hours of footage, and you certainly aren't going to sit through all of that. But I really hope you enjoyed this video and getting a first-hand look at what's going on in Airbus. You're not reading this in a magazine, hearing it from some reporter who could twist the words. You're seeing it from these actual people's mouths, and I think it's a really, really exciting way to find out what's going on in the aviation industry right now. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Make sure you hit the subscribe button like 45,000 other people have done to subscribe to my weekly aviation content. And of course, don't forget to follow me on my new Snapchat account, which is @DanTorpSnaps, and Instagram, DanTorpAviation. Follow me on Twitter also, and like me on Facebook, where you can see all the latest updates. Until I see you next time, guys, fly safe.